Let's get some more on all of this. Democratic Congressman André Carson of Indiana is joining us. He's a member of the House Intelligence Committee. Congressman, thanks for joining us.
What a pleasure. Thank you, Wolf.
Do you believe, Congressman, the stern warning from the president and the defense secretary will work to actually deter North Korea, or could this rhetoric backfire?
My hope is that this time we are de-escalating in terms of the aggression. But at the same time, I think we have to be very firm. I mean, Kim Jong-un is a masterful provocateur, and we don't want to provoke the provocateur. But at the same time, we have to send a message. Look, a threat to Guam is a threat to the United States, as was just mentioned. It is a U.S. territory. It's not just a military outpost. We have troops there. I'm confident, though, that we have, if you will, a shield there to protect Guam and others. But I'm more deeply concerned about miniaturizing a nuclear weapon and attaching it to a missile. One of the hurdles with any developing nuclear program has been to accomplish this feat and also attach this to a reentry vehicle. So he seems to be making progress, but I think any strike against North Korea could possibly bring in nuclearized nations such as Russia and China.
When you say bringing those nations, what they would get involved in, God forbid, some sort of nuclear war if the U.S. and North Korea exchanged weapons, nuclear weapons? What are you saying about China and Russia?
I would certainly hope not, but it's clear that they have aligned themselves with North Korea in the past. I mean, before the past few years, North Korea has primarily been operating with pretty much Cold War weaponry. But the fact that they've accomplished or attempting to accomplish this feat of miniaturizing a nuclear weapon and putting it inside of a missile deeply concerns me. So I think the United States has a responsibility to make an example verbally out of North Korea, but at the same time, we should not do it in a way that is undiplomatic and do it in a way that really justifies Kim Jong-un's ambitions, his megalomania. And I think that that kind of provocation could lead to unfortunate results. We're putting tens of thousands of Americans in the Korean Peninsula in harm's way, and we're jeopardizing their nearest neighbor, which is Seoul. And so I think we have to be very methodical. We have to be very wise to navigate around the egomania that is taking place on both sides.
Yeah, there are about 28,000 U.S. troops just south of the demilitarized zone in South Korea, another 200,000 American civilians living in Seoul, elsewhere in Korea as well. Is the president's use of the term fire and fury, Congressman, undercutting his message?
I think in some ways it is. I think it was an impulsive response, obviously. And so I think one of the things that has to be done when you have a president who speaks extemporaneously quite often, he has not disciplined himself in a way, or allowed his staff to discipline him or to work on being disciplined in terms of delivering his message in a firm way, but in a very measured way. I think when we make inflammatory comments against a tyrant, I think you fan the flames of hostility. But I think his response, obviously, his point was taken well. But again, we don't want to lead this this megalomaniacal personality into attacking Guam, Seoul, or anyone else.
But you heard the Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson, who had a much more measured statement earlier today, say, look, the North Korean leader, Kim Jong-un, clearly doesn't understand the language of diplomacy, and that explains why the president's rhetoric was so harsh. You buy that?
Well, we've not been diplomatic either. So I think that we have to lead by example. And I think in leading by example, we have to appear at least diplomatic, but at the same time, making an example initially, at least verbally, I don't think we should take a military response off of the table, but I think our diplomatic response sends an example. It sets the tone. It allows our international partners to join us in this fight of thwarting Kim Jong-un's ambitions, but in a very real sense, we don't want to make these kinds of inflammatory and provocative statements and put Americans in harm's way.
A preemptive U.S. military strike against targets in North Korea would immediately result in forget about a nuclear retaliatory strike, but a conventional North Korean strike against Seoul and South Korea just below the DMZ, and potentially, given the artillery, the thousands of mortars and artillery pieces, the million-man army that they have just north of the demilitarized zone, that could result in the death of tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of people within only a few days. So here's the question, Congressman, is there really a good military option when it comes to North Korea?
I can't speak to it. I'll leave that up to the generals, the very wise generals. What I will say is that I don't think that President Trump should try to make outlandish statements to one-up Kim Jong-un, but at the same time, I think we have to do what we've always done, and that is to leave the threat lingering, that if he were to attack one of our military outposts, if he were to attack South Korea or Seoul or any of our allies, I think that he will be met with equal or greater force, and he should be.
President Trump's fiery warning, the use of the words fire and fury, for example, to North Korea was improvised at that moment, not part of a formal scripted statement that he had prepared to deliver. This, according to 3 people with knowledge of his remarks. So here's the question. Does this concern you that he did not plan ahead when he spoke like that?
Absolutely, it concerns me. I mean, the presidents before, from President Obama, who handled North Korea very well, to President Bush before him and President Clinton before him, all have lost sleep to some degree over the North Korea question. I think so. As President Trump is learning how to become a president, my advice would be for him to become more measured and speak to his staffers before making these kinds of provocative statements in the future.
What I don't understand, why you think those 3 former presidents handled North Korea well. Bill Clinton tried to stop the North Korean program. He failed. George W. Bush failed in that effort over 8 years. President Obama tried desperately to prevent North Korea from developing nuclear weapons, failed. All of them failed. Why do you think they handled it well?
Well, I think it's a matter of personal constitution. I think it's a matter of personality. I think it's a matter of allowing the experts who you surround yourself with to advise you in a way, and for you to digest the information, process the information, learn the facts, learn the information, and respond appropriately and diplomatically.
Stand by, Congressman. We're going to have more to discuss. We're getting more information, as we always do here in the Situation Room. We'll take a quick break. We'll be right back. Back to Congressman André Carson, member of the Intelligence Committee. You're also former law enforcement congressman. When you hear about this raid by the FBI at Paul Manafort's suburban Alexandria, Virginia residence the day after he met with Senate Intelligence Committee investigators, what do you think?
Well, as a former police officer, I'm familiar with these so-called no-knock warrants, and they typically happen to suspects who have not been very cooperative during an investigation. They may be hostile toward investigators. They may be obstructionist in their actions. And they just may be a hindrance to the investigation overall. So I think it's a significant turn by Director Mueller in this investigation. Stay tuned.
The FBI agents did receive from a federal judge this warrant to go in there with this so-called no-knock search. Does that suggest the judge needed probable cause in order to grant that warrant? Do you believe there is some reason to believe that an actual crime may have been committed?
I think Director Mueller is a skilled investigator, as was mentioned. I mean, he left millions of dollars in the private sector to follow his passion. He's a skilled investigator. He's skilled at assembling a great and fantastic team of investigators to complete the task at hand. And I think that his instincts are pretty good as it relates to these kinds of matters. He has the experience and it shows. You believe this FBI raid at Manafort's home may have been done also, at least in part, to send a message, first of all, to Manafort, but maybe to others? Well, I think a message is already being sent. As we speak, we already have 2 congressional committees investigating this matter. We have Director Mueller and his team, a special prosecutor, investigator, in looking into these matters. So we already have a 3-pronged approach working, And I think that today's actions just add on to it. But I think the message has already been sent. It was sent months ago.
Do you believe this move, and you're a member of the House Intelligence Committee, was done in coordination with the House Intelligence Committee, the Senate Intelligence Committee? Could it have been spurred by the meeting that he had with Senate Intelligence Committee investigators only the day before?
I can't speak to these matters, but what I will say is that I think the American people are watching, and I think historians will have a lot to write about as we move forward in the future. I think one of the great things about the House Intelligence Committee specifically is that the House Intelligence Committee in many ways has gotten us to this point. And I think it's one of the beauties as we have the Senate committee as well complementing the great work, and we have Director Mueller doing his thing. So I think we're all working in concert but on separate tracks to preserve our democracy in a very real way.
Congressman André Carson, thanks as usual for joining us.